never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Mr. Robert Park of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Mr. Park, can you begin by giving us a little bit of background on yourself? To start with, where and when were you born?
Right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan in 1925.
All right, and then did you grow up in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, basically.
All right, and what schools did you go to?
I went to Alger Elementary, and then I went to Burton Junior, and I ended up at South High School.
All right. Now, did you live in the same place while you were growing up, or did you move around?
In that area.
Okay, so they got Alger Heights area around there.
It was Seymour Square,
right,
and then later over towards South High School.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My father was, he worked for a Chrysler dealer here in Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. He would go and pick up the cars at Detroit and bring them back and put in a heater and radio and test drive it and stuff like that.
Okay. And was he able to keep regular employment during the Depression?
No.
Okay.
No, he lost his employment, and my folks lost their home. Mm-hmm. At that time, they lived in the old Grand Rapids Airport area on 32nd Street. Mm-hmm. And they lost all that.
All right, and then did they just rent homes after that or live with relatives, or?
I'm sorry?
Did they rent homes after that or live with relatives?
Yeah, we rented apartments and little homes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right, and how many kids were in the family?
Just my sister and I.
All right, all right. Now, as it got into the late 1930s, I mean, did your father find other jobs? And
yeah. It was later, yes. And then we was able to move to that apartment where I could go to high school.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then, do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, yeah, I do. And I can remember at the time thinking that I'll never have to go.
Because how old were you when?
16, I think.
Yeah. And then how did you learn about it?
It was on the radio.
Okay. All right, and that's on a Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then you go to school then on Monday?
Yes.
Okay, and then was everyone talking about that, or did they do anything different at the school, or was it just a regular day?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
I know we were very active in our classes, promoting war bonds and mm-hmm. things like that later.
Okay. Now, before Pearl Harbor happened, did you know very much about what was going on in Europe or anything like that?
Well, I was a kid, just a young
mm-hmm.
guy, and I really didn't know that much about what was happening.
Mm-hmm. All right, but now you have to pay attention after we get into it. All right. Now, did a lot of your friends start to go and enlist as soon as they were old enough, or?
There was several of my friends did, yeah, enlisted or was drafted.
Okay. All right. And then how did you wind up in the service?
What happened was that I was born at the end of August, and because of that, my mother held me back a year before she put me into kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, I guess you might say that was the end of the result, is how I got drafted, is because I was still in school. Mm-hmm. I was in my senior year, the first half of my senior year at South High.
Okay, so that would have been a spring of 1943?
The summer, 43.
Yeah, okay. So they send you a draft notice, and then once you got the draft notice, then what did you do?
Well, I just kept studying and mm-hmm. doing the best I could at school, and I was inducted into the reserve in November. And then I was called for active duty on December 18th.
All right. And then where did they send you for basic training?
That was neat because from Fort Sheridan, Illinois, we took a train to California, to Camp Roberts, which is north of Los Angeles.
All right. How long did the train trip take?
Oh, that train trip was amazing. I mean, I was just a kid, and to see all that beautiful scenery, you know, and everything. They had, I think it was what they call the Northern Route. It was just beautiful.
So you're going through the Rocky Mountains and
Yeah.
all that?
And I had never seen anything like that. And so I wrote an extensive letter to my mother about it. And yeah, it was really something.
All right. Now, did the train have to stop a lot? And was it a long trip?
It was considerably long. I don't recall it stopping much.
Okay. And do you remember how they fed you, or could you get any sleep?
Yeah, some. We were all pretty excited. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then when you got to Camp Roberts, I mean, what was that like?
Well, it was big, and it was a major training place for artillery recruits, and I was assigned into the artillery branch.
All right. And do you know how they made that decision?
Pardon me?
And why were you assigned to the artillery?
I think it was as a result of tests that I took regarding my skills. I'd taken a lot of math in school,
Okay.
and I was given assignment to a rather technical school, instrument and survey school,
All right.
which required more than just going and learning how to shoot a gun and things like that. It was quite a bit of information needed for our skills
Right.
and later on.
Okay. And then, now describe a little bit, what kind of reception do you get? You arrive at Camp Roberts, how do they treat you?
Well, we were just recruits, you know, just raw recruits, and so then we were initiated into the training for all soldiers, marching and all that, and then later we got more technical training.
Okay. Well, in the basic training part at the beginning, how much emphasis did they place on discipline, you know, following orders?
A lot.
Okay.
I mean, that was the big part of it, sure.
And what did they do with people who weren't doing a good job?
I don't recall anybody washing out, you might say.
Right. But were there punishments or things like that for minor infractions?
I think there was a lot of adjustments. They wasn't all just kids like me. They
Okay.
were older people. It was a bad part of the war, and so they were drafting a lot of people.
Yeah, so you're getting men who were in their mid and late 20s even.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of these guys already had families and lives or work experience and things
Absolutely,
too.
yeah.
All right. Now, for you, how easy was it to adjust to Army life?
Well, I think I was very fortunate. We had been taking special courses in gym in school, and they were very vigorous. And so those of us that were just young guys, we were in good shape.
All right. So some of the older men maybe had more trouble with that?
Well, yeah, it must have been tough for them, yeah.
Okay. All right. And in general, how did the drill sergeants treat you?
Pardon?
How did the drill sergeants treat you?
Oh, well, they just, in those days, they just were pretty rough, you know. Hey, you do this or else.
All right. Okay. And how long did the basic training part last?
17 weeks.
Okay. Now, does that include the technical school, or does that come
Some
later?
of the technical school, yes.
Okay, so you're starting in that too. Okay. Now, describe a little bit the technical training. What were you learning to do? And
Instrument and survey school was basically learning instruments and using mathematics to calculate angles for firing the guns, and also the procedures for promoting the firing of the guns on the enemy.
All right, now what kind of instruments were you learning to use?
Well, we had the aiming circle, which was a little thing on a tripod, had a reticule in it. And then we had the battery commander's telescope, which has fascinated me. What that was an instrument that was probably 4 feet high or better on a triangle, on a tripod.
Yeah.
And the monoculars was on a pivot, and you could spread them out and put the unit behind a tree and look around the tree, which was kind of fascinating, you know, that you might be able to save your neck by and still be able to observe. And then we had the rangefinder, which was also an instrument that was on a tripod, and it was rather antiquated in those days, but it was probably, I would say 3 or 4 feet wide, and it would calculate ranges.
All right. Now, did you have to use a slide rule for your calculations?
I did, and I got one yet. I still got my slide rule. Yeah, we had to learn angles, and I'm sorry, but my math escapes me at this age, but it was rather intense, the mathematics part.
Okay, all right. And then do you go on from Camp Roberts to another camp for more training after that, or what happens to you?
That's exactly what happened. They gave us a furlough home, and then I was reported to Camp Bowie, Texas, and my unit was the 13th Armored Division.
All right. And now what town in Texas is Camp Bowie near?
Brownwood. Actually, it's Brownwood, near South Dallas.
Okay. All right. And now what was that camp like?
Huge. And the division was, the components of the division and the extra units that were attached to the division took up a lot of space. And it had a great big military reservation where we used to go and solve our problems.
Right.
What they used to call maneuvers. You're familiar with that term?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got the whole units, whole battalions, or even regiments or brigades out there all at once, driving around on the range. And now, what specific unit were you assigned to?
I was assigned to a firing battery in the 498th Armored Field Artillery Battalion.
Okay.
And that consisted of headquarters battery, A, B, C batteries, and then the maintenance unit.
All right. And that's a battery, it's a firing battery, so you've got guns. Now, was this self-propelled artillery that you had?
I'm sorry?
Did you have self-propelled artillery?
Yes,
M7s?
the M7 was self-propelled. It was on a tank turret, and it was a 105 howitzer.
All right. And now, does this have an open top?
Yes.
All right. And then how many men would ride on that vehicle normally, do you think?
There would be maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. Now, you were an observer, though, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, did you travel separately from the guns?
Yes. We traveled mostly in a half-track or a Jeep.
All right. And then were observers organized into sections? Would you be with a couple other men?
Yes. We had what they call a recon section, and then the battery commander had what they call the executive unit. They had a function that's somewhat like ours, but we were recon.
Okay. So was your job to go out, would you go with the infantry units, go out forward, or the tank units?
We were attached to them most of the time.
Okay. Yeah, so now people think that, okay, if you're in the artillery, well, that's nice and safe because you're back in the rear someplace.
Yeah. No,
but
we were at the front most of the time.
All right. Now, let's see. No, by the way, let's see. Where did you spend Christmas 1943? Was that in California?
Yes.
Okay. What do they do for Christmas in the Army?
That's a long ways back, but I would imagine they might have given us something.
Okay. But you don't remember much about any particular better food or anything like that?
We were deeply involved in training.
Okay. All right. Now, then, when did you complete the training, or when was the 13th Armored ready to leave?
The 13th Armored had formed in 1942 in Camp Bowie, California. And then they were transferred. The Armored Force had earlier armored divisions from 1 through 11 or 12.
12, yeah.
The 13th, 14th, 16th, and 20th all come along later. Although the 13th was actually in training in 1942.
Right.
And then the advanced training at Camp Bowie. And so we didn't go over right away.
Right.
That's a good question, because I read about that later, and General Patton was instrumental in getting us over there. They wanted a couple more divisions, and that's when we left.
All right. So,
later.
So when did you actually go overseas?
Actually, it was in January of 1945.
All right. And now, what do you remember about? I mean, how did they get you from Texas to Europe?
Troop train. Troop train.
Okay. You're in a troop train, and then where do you? But you got to get on a ship at some point.
It was in New Jersey.
Okay. So you go to New Jersey, Fort Dix or someplace like that, or
Yeah.
Camp Shanks, or that's New York, but okay, Fort Dix. Yeah. Okay. And then what kind of ship do you go on?
It was just a Army transport.
And what do you remember about the trip over?
That was tricky. We obviously had a lot of decks, and some of us were way down the bottom, and we heard this racket going on. You know, you could hear it, and what it was there was the Navy was trying to protect us from some submarines. I think that was basically what it was about.
Right.
But I know some of the units that had gone previously were bombed by the German Air Force in Norway. Even though we took a circuity route to the north, there was the German threat of submarines and their Air Force bombers.
All right.
So we always had escorts of British naval ships and Americans, and they protected a lot of the convoys.
Okay. Now you're sailing over in January. So what was the weather like on the sea voyage?
Bad. Cold.
All right. Did you spend much time on deck, or did
No.
you just stay below and?
We did exercises just to keep limber.
And how many of you got sick?
Actually, none of us got sick going over.
Okay.
Coming home, we were all sick.
Okay. Because it's kind of unusual if you've got bad weather, people don't get sick.
Well, it wasn't that bad. I
Okay.
mean, evidently it wasn't that bad, because I don't recall us being in real deep trouble that way.
All right. So it wasn't stormy, it was just cold. So it was just cold going over.
Yeah.
It wasn't really bad weather. Okay.
Basically, yeah,
All right.
cold weather.
And then could you go up on deck and see other ships in the convoy? All right. And could you see very much, or was it too foggy, or?
No, the weather was not too bad. I remember seeing a lot of ships.
All right. And about how long did it take you to get across the ocean?
Oh boy, I don't know. That's another toughie. The time went fast, but
Okay.
it probably took a week or better.
Yeah, but you might have been with a faster convoy if it's a week or 10 days, because some of them took longer than that. All right. Okay. Now, where did you land did you land right in?
In England.
Okay, England first. Okay.
Yeah. What was that little town on the south side of England?
Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, Southampton is the big port, and there's Plymouth.
It was a
and-
port, and we just stayed there overnight and then crossed the channel.
Okay. Yeah, it was probably Plymouth or Southampton. Those are the most likely places.
Might have been Southampton?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could have been.
Okay. And then where did you land in France?
Le Havre.
Okay. And do you remember what the port looked like when you got there?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I remember that we got on a troop train.
Okay.
What'd they call them, 40 and 8?
Yeah.
40 men or something like that?
So you were riding in boxcars?
Yeah.
Okay. And now, were those heated or anything like that?
No.
So this is January in Northern Europe, and you're riding in a boxcar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Freezing.
Yeah. All right. And then where did they take you to in the train?
We ended up in a little place in Normandy, and we were billeted on a farm.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then were they assembling the division there? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were assembling the unit in the area.
All right. And then, and how long did it take for them to send you up to the front?
Not very long. It wasn't very long. We were in the first combat. We had to march, as a division, a unit, to a place in southern France called Sarreguemines.
That's probably northeastern France? Because southern France would be by Italy.
It could be that it was further north.
Yeah.
It was that was our first mission,
Right.
Fire mission, and we were firing at the Germans on the other side of the river.
Right. Because you're probably on the Saar River, which is northeast.
Somewhere in the Saar area.
Okay, yeah, that's northeast corner of France by Germany. Yeah, okay. And what do you remember about that? Going into combat for the first time?
Well, I was not active there. Just
Okay.
we had officers that were the official observers,
Right.
and then those of us that in the ranks, we were just helpers.
Right.
But there was a lot of fire missions to with our artillery across the river.
Right. Okay. And now, were the Germans firing back at you?
Yeah, some. Not bad, but
Okay.
some.
All right. Now, when this is going on, do you have any real understanding of what's happening in the larger battle? I mean, can you see our forces going forward or anything?
We got the Stars and Stripes paper in the Army, and a lot of times there'd be the comments made about the way things are going.
Okay. But when you're up there and you're actually working on a fire mission or something, you don't really know what else is going on.
You're concerned with what's right in front of you.
All right. Okay. Now, when they get you up there, so you're up there, you have the first fire mission. Now, are you going to stay in one place for a while, or do they have you moving a lot?
We did there, but then there was urgency in the Army to move some divisions north.
Okay.
And so we did not participate in crossing the river there.
Right.
We went back north again.
Okay. Now, did you go up into Belgium, or were you still in France or Luxembourg? Or?
We was just outside of Belgium.
Okay. All right. And then, are you part of the attack on the Siegfried Line and the German defenses along their frontier?
I don't recall us being involved with the Siegfried Line. I know there was some divisions that were hung up there.
Right.
But we were asked to go north. I got into that after the war. I read a couple books about the strategy.
Right.
And I found out some of what was happening. It was kind of interesting. In fact, we had a program where I live here recently, and they asked me to talk because they thought I knew something about what was going on. And they asked particulars about what you actually was doing.
Right.
And it was interesting in the fact that because of my knowledge, I knew pretty much what was going on. What happened was, way back in Africa, General Montgomery from the British Army, he wanted to take the major city in Egypt.
Well, Egypt they already had.
He wanted to take it, but Patton beat him. He beat him to that city. I forget the name of it. But
I think that competition was probably in Sicily.
No, this was still in Africa.
Okay, so then in Tunisia probably, because
Egypt or one of them other
North
countries.
African countries.
Libya.
Yeah. Okay.
And what happened was that when we finished the job in Africa, we went to Italy, to Sicily, and then up the boot to Rome.
Yep.
And Montgomery, the British general that was in charge of the theater, he wanted to go to Rome first. He wanted to get to Rome before Patton, and he didn't get there.
Okay. Well, Patton and Montgomery, well, Rome they only took right before D-Day.
Patton's
So,
Third Army beat Montgomery to Rome.
well, okay. I'm sorry. I think you got that a little bit confused because Patton was already up in England because Rome is taken June 5th, 1944, which is right before D-Day, and Montgomery is in charge of D-Day. So they competed in Africa, they competed in Sicily, but Patton goes up to England to prepare for D-Day, and so does Montgomery. But anyway, they're rivals with each other, okay? They're competing, and now how does that affect you up there in 1945?
What it affected me was that they asked us to go up and relieve the problem that they had in the First Army. The First Army, under Montgomery, was shooting for Berlin,
Right.
and they bypassed several areas. And so we were assigned to that to clean that up.
Okay.
They called it the Ruhr Pocket.
Okay. Yes. There was very hard fighting there. All right. Now describe a little bit. First of all, I guess, what do you remember about just physically living day to day when you're in the field there in February and March and you're moving around? What was it like? How do you live at that point?
We weren't getting enough sleep. We were cold all the time and under stress, obviously. But yeah, it was really bad.
Now, did you sleep in the half track, or did you find houses, or what did you do?
Sleep on the ground, or
Okay.
a lot of times when there'd be harassing shelling from the Germans, and it wasn't safe to be anywhere really. So what we'd do is dig a hole, or maybe get under a tank or a half track. It was not a very good idea.
All right. Okay. Now, so was it really when you cross into Germany that you get into the heavier fighting then? Was it around the Ruhr Pocket where you have most of the activity?
The Ruhr Pocket was heavily defended. And it wasn't just our division, there was several other divisions involved.
Right.
And there was considerable number of Germans there defending the area because they were trying to hold us up to keep us from getting across into Germany. And that is into the Berlin area.
Right.
So it was very heavily defended. And for us, it always seemed the same thing. If they had ammunition, they were going to get shooted. And if there was no food and not much hope, surrender.
Okay.
And that's what happened. We caught not just our division, but there was over 200,000 German soldiers captured, and a half a dozen to a dozen high-ranking German officers.
Right. Okay. Now, did you see some of the prisoners yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. What did they look like to you?
they were discouraged and bedraggled. They were tired and hungry and ready to quit.
Did you have a sense of how old they were? Were they your age, or were they younger or older?
We run into some of them that were a lot younger than me, kids.
Yeah.
They were just kids. And what happened was that they had a firearm that was something like our bazooka. It was this long with a charge on the end.
Right.
And they would give that to these young kids, and then when we would go through their city or town, they would stand up in the window and fire on our forces. And that was sad because they were just young people.
Yeah. Now, did your battalion, did you lose a lot of vehicles? Did you take many casualties?
We did not lose that many. We were very fortunate.
Now, did your battery take some casualties?
Yeah.
Okay, and how were they hit? Was it enemy artillery or what?
Yeah. There would be counter battery fire from the Germans.
Right.
And then also there was what we call harassing fire. Even when you weren't in combat, in the combat zone,
Right.
there would be firing on our positions.
Okay.
Of course, you have to realize that they knew everywhere. They knew where we were.
Right.
They knew all the points, all of the local points were all fired on previously and practiced. They knew the exact range and so forth. So we were setting ducks,
Right.
you might say.
Okay. Now, did you see much by way of combat aircraft? Did you get air support from Americans, or did you ever see German planes?
Not very many Germans. We were fired on by a German fighter once. And that's the only thing I can remember about that. There was not that much aircraft left. This was in March and April.
Yeah.
And there wasn't that much left. We had superior Air Force, obviously.
Yeah. And they were about out of fuel, so.
And they were down to a few,
Yeah. Now, did you ever see a German jet? Because they had some jet aircraft.
No, I did not.
Okay. All right, I didn't see that part. Now, did you, on your side, did the Americans give you a lot of air support? Were there bombers and things attacking ahead of you that you could see go over?
Yeah,
Okay.
I saw this.
All right. Now, describe a little bit. You're in the fighting that's going on around the Ruhr Pocket. What specifically did you do when your battery is firing and your section is helping with fire direction? What were you doing?
We were establishing a observation point. We would look for high ground and a house or a building where we could see. And one of the things that I carried was a little thing with a tube about this long and that big around. It was a 20-power telescope. Then I had my binoculars. But that little telescope was a precious thing because with 20 power, and you could pick up on locations pretty good with that. We basically would find a place to set up an OP and then we would fire on any known positions or coordinate fire between battalions. We had that tremendous firepower of 3 battalions of artillery. And they used to have what they called a posite fuse, which was secret at that time. But the posite fuse permitted us to use artillery that would fire around and it would explode at a certain distance from the ground, not on the ground,
Right.
above the ground.
Right.
And the German infantry was scared to death of it because it was devastating.
All right. So you had a lot of firepower and you were using it. All right. Now, how much did you see of While the fighting is still going on, how much did you see of the civilian population as you're moving through either France and Germany? How much did you see of the people?
You didn't see them much. We saw a few that were trying to get away from the fighting, but otherwise we never saw them too much.
Okay. All right. And then as the war is progressing, now were you still around the Ruhr Pocket when the war ended, or had you moved on from there?
No, we moved down.
Okay.
We moved from there. Once the pocket was secured, we moved down considerably far down into what they call the Bavarian area. And we had a sector there, and we had several not major battles,
Right.
but minor battles, crossing rivers and getting into Austria. And we were in Austria when they surrendered.
All right. Now, over the course of that time, I mean, did you see much by the way of German tanks or armor, or was it just infantry you were fighting, or do you not?
mean the enemy?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
Not a lot toward the end.
So they'd just be
There
holed
would
up
be pockets of resistance.
so they'd be holed up in certain places,
Yeah,
just
but-
defending those.
You know, we had our whole big army. We had 3 or 4 armies there, and we overwhelmed them.
Right. All right. Now, in this last stage now, are you seeing any more of the people, or people kind of coming out, or does that only really happen after the war ends?
Are you familiar with the Big Three conference during the war, when they set the occupation areas? We had to retreat back to the Bavarian territory.
Right.
And then we set up watches there for any action that would be going on. What I didn't like was something that we saw, and that is the advance of all of the refugees from the Russian advance. Some of the atrocities that the Russian committed caused this tremendous influx of people trying to get onto the American side of the territory.
Right.
And actually, this was in May. After May 8th, they tried to cross a major river with what few belongings they had in that ice water. And we weren't supposed to let them across, but nobody shot at them. We threatened them, but we didn't. We shot over their heads, or we let them come.
Okay. And did you see anything of the Russians?
I did not myself.
Okay. Were there men in your unit who did, or did you hear about them from other Americans?
We heard things, yeah. But I realized after I read about it after the war, I realized why. Because the Russians suffered terribly. And so then when they started pushing back into Germany, some of the atrocities maybe were somewhat understandable.
Yeah. And that was the attitude they brought with them. They were getting revenge, essentially. Yeah, so treating people very badly. So there's refugees coming over. Now, and then within the area then, sort of in Bavaria there, do you stay there for a while, or do they move you again?
We stayed there for a while, and then they moved us back because they had the idea that we would be sent back to the States for training for the invasion of Japan, because we didn't have that much combat.
Right. Okay. But then what actually happened to you?
Well, I was very fortunate in several different things. One of the things was that when the shooting stopped, they gave us a tour to Berchtesgaden. And we actually was given a tour to that area where Hitler's, what they call Hitler's mountaintop retreat at Berchtesgaden.
Yep.
And then we went to Paris, and we had a pass for Paris. And so we got to see Paris, France. And then we got on the boat and come home.
All right. So when did you come home?
It was in July of, we got home in August of 1945.
Okay. All right. So you're not really staying on as part of the Army of Occupation. You are, as you said, you're preparing to invade Japan.
That's right. We were there just temporarily.
Now, did you get much of a chance? You mentioned that. Did you ever get much of a sense for the Germans as a people generally, one way or another?
We liked them.
Okay.
I can remember that. We liked the German people.
So you did get to meet them at least a little bit after the war was over.
Yeah.
All right. And I mean, you saw the refugees and things.
We
coming
weren't
to
supposed to fraternize.
Right.
That was the rule. But you can't avoid everything. And so we kind of liked the German people.
All right. Now, could you talk to any of them, or just kind of see them in the streets? Or?
Not too much.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, tell me about the. You said the trip back across the ocean. That wasn't so good.
The what?
Your trip back across the ocean.
That was a dandy. They had a storm in the English Channel. The minute we got on the ship, it was bad. And it was bad all halfway across the Atlantic. And everybody was sick. I couldn't believe it that everybody was sick. Yeah. There was they had a Navy gun crew on that troop ship that manned the guns, and those guys were sick, and they were used to being on the ocean. So everybody was sick. It was really bad. I mean, the first part there out of the English Channel is really bad.
All right. Now, when they get you back, where do you land in the States?
At Norfolk.
Okay. So go to Virginia. All right. And then once you land, what do they do with you?
Well, the first thing I saw was a Red Cross lady with a glass of milk coming down the gangway. That was so welcome, you know. And they gave us a nice dinner, and then we were shipped to our different states for a furlough.
Okay. All right. So you get to go home for a little while.
Home.
And then do you have to come back and report someplace?
Yes, back to California.
Okay.
We had to go back to California for amphibious training of the invasion of Japan.
All right. Now, did you have time to start that, or did the Japanese surrender first?
No, actually what happened was, while I was home, they surrendered in August. But we still had a report, and we got out to California, and there was hundreds of guys on that playground there, and some big general got up and says, "Hey, you guys, you don't have to go to Japan." Ooh. We thought maybe we might live through it after all.
Right. But then how long did you stay in the Army?
Well, we were there for some training, just to keep us on edge, you know, or keep us in shape.
Yeah, right.
Then we got a couple passes to LA and Frisco. Nice. And we got to see some of the California. And then our unit deactivated. The 13th Armored was deactivated. And that was when I lost a rank there. Then we were transferred temporarily into what they called the 20th Armored Division, and that was just temporary. And then they were deactivated. So then those of us that were junior in the service, you know, that hadn't had much time in,
Right.
we didn't have enough points to be discharged, like the guys that had been in for a couple of years.
Right.
So we all got shipped to the 2nd Armored Division in Fort Hood, Texas. Back to Texas again.
Right.
So I was in California twice and then Texas twice.
All right. Yeah. And did you have any actual duties, or are you just kind of standing
Oh
around?
yeah, we did a lot of training.
Okay.
And then we had to participate in the Army Day Parade in San Antonio in April of 1946. And it was interesting because the parade marshal was a guy by the name of Jonathan Wainwright, who was a major general in the Bataan campaign early in the war.
Right.
And I believe he was captured by
Yes.
the by the Japanese.
He was the one left in charge when MacArthur left.
Yeah. But he was the parade marshal, and then when we got that over with, they let us go home.
All right. And then once you go back home, what do you do?
I was so glad to be home. I lost a little hearing. I lost my hair in the service. That was a funny thing. We were on maneuvers a lot in Texas earlier in our training, and we'd go out in the field for a week at a time, you know, douse the dirt and everything. So we'd come back to the barracks and we'd get under them showers and take that old GI soap, and I think I scrubbed all the oil
your hair
off
off.
my scalp. Then when we went over, it was cold, and we had that little wool knit cap, and then the helmet liner, and then the steel helmet. And so I probably lost my hair because there was no circulation. You took your helmet off to wash and shave, and that was it. You kept it on, otherwise you're going to get killed. So that's basically what happened. I had a little fuzz when I got home, but otherwise it wasn't much. And then my hearing was not as bad at that point because I had recuperated from some of them explosions.
Right.
I had some narrow escapes, and you know, you couldn't hear for a couple days from the shells going off.
Okay. So those were German shells hitting you, or
Yeah.
just the noise from your own guns?
Yeah, the shells coming in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But then once you get home, and your family recognizes you even without the hair, all right. Now, do you go to school? Do you get a job? What do you do?
Well, we filed for unemployment. You know, they had some kind of a thing where we could have some money coming
Right.
in.
Right.
And I found work. It wasn't too long. A couple months maybe. I found a job and I went to work.
Okay. And what kind of job was it?
I worked in a mill supply house. We crated up machinery and light tools and delivered them around to different factories and places in Grand Rapids.
All right. Now, did you stay with them, or did you change jobs?
I
or-
stayed with them a year.
Okay.
Then I quit that job and enrolled in junior college.
And what kind of career did you go into then in the end?
Pardon?
What kind of career did you have then?
Oh, it was good. It was good. It was. I enrolled into business administration and literary arts, and I was doing pretty good. But I had met my future wife, and after about a year or so, I got engaged, and then I had a part-time job while I was at college, but I had to quit. And we got married, and I went and found other employment. I had a wife. I had a wife and then a baby coming, and so I needed the money, and so I took a job in a factory for a while just to make do.
Right.
I often wondered about the fact that, you know, if I probably should have tried to finish college. But as it turned out, I was able to get some credits anyway. I went to Davenport a couple times, and then also the stuff that I took in the Army, I took that, some of them major courses in the Army,
Right.
and I was credited with that. In fact, it was kind of neat. The principal at South High heard about all that math that I had to take in the Army for my job.
Right.
And so he awarded me my high school diploma,
Okay.
but I was in Germany. And so my mother went up on the stage and got my diploma the following year.
All right. All right. Now, when you look back on the time that you spent in the Army, aside from losing some of your hearing and losing some of your hair, how do you think the time in the Army affected you?
Again, I think I was just very fortunate because when I went in, we got all that training. And that probably was instrumental in our physical condition at being young. Helped me get through that thing. The older men was tough. It was tough for them, especially if they had a family back home. And so I felt that I was very fortunate in not being involved with heavy combat
Right.
to speak of. We had some bad times, but it was nothing like some of the people that were in earlier.
Right. Yeah, or the ones really up fighting in the front lines, the
Yeah.
foot soldiers. And
So I never got that, what they called combat fatigue. I was very fortunate in that respect.
Now, do you think you were more grown up when you got home than?
My mother says I aged 10 years.
All right. Now, are there, when you think back about your time in the service, are there any other particular things that stand out in your memory that you haven't mentioned here yet? Are there other stories or things that stay with you?
Well, there was several humorous ones. Later, not right away, but later in my life, our division formed an association, and we had reunions. So then we'd talk with guys that we were with, you know, over there, and it was kind of neat. And somebody heard about me that was a teacher, and she wrote me a letter and asked me to write about my experiences. And so I did, and I kept it. I didn't put any of that bad stuff in
Right.
there, because this was just going to a young kid, you know, in school. So I tried to inject a little humor into my letter, and I told this young man about some of my experiences. For instance, one of them that stands out was when we were billeted in France. The barn that we were at, that farm, had been hit by a bomb, and there was a hole in the roof. And it was snowing, and we were down there trying to
Be careful with your microphone there.
trying to keep warm, you know. And then also, they had a vineyard there where they would grow grapes. And so they made primitive cider or wine in the area, and it was not uncommon for us to go to the local store and buy a loaf of bread or a bottle of wine just to supplement our diet. And then at the farm there, they did that. They made wine or cider. And there was a gentleman with a big pair of heavy boots on that used to get in the vat and squash the grapes.
Yep.
And one day we had a latrine out behind the barn there, and a pig fell into the latrine, and the guy went in there with them boots. And after that, we couldn't drink any of that. We couldn't drink any of them wine. Yeah, it was kind of funny.
All right. And are there other stories like that, or other things you can remember?
Yeah, I had several like that. Like in Texas, when we were in training, there was always snakes and bugs, you know. Snakes and bugs all the time, and they would crawl into your hole at night or try to get into your bag. And what I used to do is I had a barracks bag with my clothes, and we would tie it on the branch of a tree. There wasn't too many trees, but there was trees, and so you'd tie your barracks bag onto the tree, and then in the morning you could get fresh clothing if you wanted. And sometimes you'd take that down and open it up, and there'd be a spider right there on top. It seemed like there was a lot of that. We were always running into something like that.
All right. Okay. Well, it makes for a good story. So I'd just like to close out here by thanking you for coming in and sharing a story with us today.
Thank you.
All right.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.